Hey everybody, welcome to week 7 of our English 3180 online course. We are about halfway through, and as you know, this week looks a lot different than the past several weeks because we're taking a pause on our reading and discussion routine to do some brainstorming for your final project that's going to come more at the end of the semester. So this video is going to be a little bit shorter. I don't have a mini lecture to share with you, and I just want to take a minute to revive in your minds the ideas of what you're doing this week. I'm going to talk you through some of the options for your topics and issues that you could discuss. Then I'm going to have our chat check-in number 7 prompt ready to go for you, and then I'm going to close out this video. So even though it's going to be quick, we'll get right to it. Okay, so I went over some of this in last week's video, but I just want to reiterate that your brainstorming project for this week is intended to help you hone in on a topic for your final project, it's going to be an exploratory research paper. There's going to be some secondary research involved. But really what I want is for you to be able to press deeper into an issue or a topic that has come to light for you this semester. Now, I understand that if we're doing this brainstorming at midterm time, it's not going to contain some of the stuff that we are going to cover after this week. So what I want to do in this video is talk you guys through not just a reflection back on what we've already talked about, but I want to hit the high points of where we're going because something might spark your imagination as we move forward. And that should give you some comfort, right? Whatever you decide to do your presentation on for this brainstorming project, it could change, and that's okay. Hopefully doing this brainstorming project will solidify for you what the focus should look like, even if the topic changes, if that makes sense. So if you'll remember, we've been talking since week 1 about the history of rhetoric, and all along the way we've been questioning the hegemonic presentation of that history, right? We've been trying to spend this semester examining rhetors and even entire cultures who have been marginalized when it comes to the history of rhetoric. So even though we're not staying in ancient Greece, we did start there. We talked about the sophists and Plato and some of the class distinctions that perhaps Plato was trying to preserve when he was arguing against the sophists. We talked about Aspasia and Isocrates and the, not feminism, but the interesting dynamics around women participating in rhetorical discourse. We talked about Aristotle and Cicero and sort of the iterations of rhetorical discourse as they became, I don't want to say the peak of Greek thought, but this is sort of like the big guns, and then Cicero represents the influence on Rome. Then we took a turn because what we want to do is now start looking at cultures and voices that have traditionally been marginalized within rhetorical historical discourse. So we talked about African rhetorical traditions, and we looked at the Ptah-hotep, and we thought about the ways that African rhetorical theories and strategies are very rich and often predate what we might think of as the earliest rhetorical discourses. We also looked at Chinese rhetorical traditions, not just Confucius, although we saw that in terms of history, Confucianism is the one that ended up being the state-sponsored form of rhetorical presentation. So that brings us to this week, right? We introduced the curiosity-led research project, which is your final project for the semester. And we are talking about this multimodal brainstorming presentation. Now, in the next weeks, just to give you a little sneak preview, and you've probably already looked at this if you've scrolled through all the modules, but we are going to talk about medieval rhetoric and think about not just some of the classical Christian rhetorical voices that emerged in this period, especially Augustine, but Julian of Norwich, who is a female rhetorician writing at this time. But we're going to examine some Islamic rhetoric. So we're thinking about not just traditional Christian rhetorics, but some feminist perspectives, perhaps thinking about Islamic rhetoric as well. Then we're going to think about the Renaissance period, the European Renaissance to be more specific, but there are a lot of things happening here in terms of early, like maybe proto-feminist rhetorical theory and ideas about what it means to be a scholar. Then we're going to think about the rhetoric of the early Americas because, again, nothing happens in a vacuum. And just because there was rhetoric happening in Europe and there weren't Europeans in the Americas, it doesn't mean that there wasn't rhetoric happening. So we're going to think about indigenous peoples, especially North American indigenous peoples, for our focus. I mean, there's far too many for us to fully discuss in 1 week, but we do want to give thoughtful attention to this area. Then we'll fly back to Europe for the Enlightenment, but we're going to see a lot more. Women just continue to study and write and refuse to be silenced. So we'll read some Mary Wollstonecraft, kind of juxtaposing her with John Locke and Hume. And then we'll move on to the Belles Lettres era and the emergence of composition as a discipline. And then we're going to finish off we're going to come back to the Americas and really look at the rhetoric of Frederick Douglass, who's an African-American voice that becomes very important and is not given probably as much attention as he should be. Then our final weeks will be really digging into our papers. So thinking about where we're going, some of those topics may spark your interest, and maybe you don't feel perhaps as well positioned to introduce a research topic from that group of readings as maybe you do from all of the readings that you've already completed. That doesn't matter. If you'd like to tackle a topic or an issue that you are interested in seeing if it comes to light in our further readings, then you should absolutely propose that and put that in your presentation. Remember, your presentation should have at least 2 different topic ideas that you're considering, right? So this is not where you have to come to a final decision, but rather you're thinking about the reasons why either topic. You could have 3 topics perhaps if you can talk through them fairly quickly, but having a couple that you're thinking about and kind of judging those pros and cons within your presentation, I think is what's going to become most important, because this compare-contrast not only can help you think through the reasons why you might pursue research on a certain topic, but I think it's also going to become more generative for us as a class, because we're all going to be watching each other's presentations in the coming week after everyone posts to the discussion, and we want to be able to be presenting as many possible topics as possible. That was possible twice. I think you know what I mean, though. So I hope that this helps you kind of feel like you have some freedom of movement in this project. It's truly a brainstorm. So from one of my favorite shows, 30 Rock, there's no judgment in brainstorming, right? So just try to play around with the ideas so that you can hit on the one that's going to be the most exciting and the most fun for you to research as we finish out this semester. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to pull us back to our full view. and do a couple quick announcements, and then we'll close out this video. Okay, so a couple quick announcements. Embedded into this week's announcement, as you'll see, there are a couple tutorials for screencasting software. As you saw from the assignment, I am asking that you do some kind of visual presentation alongside how you're going to talk through your topic brainstorms. So I've put these tutorials in there. They are by no means the only tutorials that are out there, and the two platforms that I'm presenting here, I think one's Screencastify and Screencast-O-Matic. Those are two free platforms. There are other free platforms that you could use, such as Loom. There are other platforms. I believe Adobe Spark might be free or have a free version. But there are lots of ways that you could create an audio-visual presentation with your face or without your face. If you prefer to take your face out of the equation, so to speak, you can use PowerPoint and sort of record your voice over whatever visuals you decide to incorporate into the slides, if that makes sense. Okay, I think that does it. I just wanted to give one final announcement, and then I'll do the chat check-in. That's right, I forgot about that. So one final announcement is that if you'd like to have a meeting with me via Zoom, please send me an email with your dates and times that you would prefer, maybe one that works best for you. I am going to do my best to make whatever works for you work for me, because I want to be available to you guys, especially as we're getting this project put together. So feel free. Several of you have already made appointments with me, and that's awesome. I'm looking forward to all the conversations that we're going to have this week. Okay, last thing, chat check-in number 7. The question is, if you could travel back in time and have a really satisfying, rigorous discussion with one rhetorician in early rhetorical history, who would it be and why? So hopefully that gives you a lot of things to chat about in our chat. Otherwise, I will see you guys in next week's video. Bye, everybody.